The briefing room fell silent when Captain Marcus Reaper Valdez posed the question that would change everything. 24 hours earlier, intelligence had intercepted chatter about a high-value target holed up in a Taliban compound deep in Afghanistan's Kunar province. The mission parameters were brutal: a night insertion, no air support, and extraction dependent entirely on precise timing. What made it impossible was the terrain: a razor-thin valley where helicopters couldn't maneuver and fixed-wing aircraft couldn't provide close air support. "Any pilots?" Reaper's voice cut through the humid air of the forward operating base like a blade. His weathered face scanned the assembled operators, Delta Force commandos, and intelligence personnel. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Everyone knew what he meant. They needed someone who could thread the needle, someone capable of flying low and fast through mountain passes that had claimed aircraft for decades. From the shadows near the back wall, a figure stirred. She had been so still, so unremarkable in her dusty flight suit, that most hadn't noticed her presence. Lieutenant Colonel Zara Ghost Nakamura rose slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. At 5'4", she seemed almost fragile among the towering special operators, but something in her dark eyes commanded attention. "Ma'am," Reaper's tone carried skeptical surprise. Several operators exchanged glances. This wasn't what anyone had expected. "I can fly it," Ghost said simply, her voice steady and quiet. The Japanese-American pilot had learned long ago that in a world dominated by alpha males, action spoke louder than credentials. She didn't mention her 1,000 hours in the A-10 Thunderbolt, didn't reference her Silver Star from Iraq, didn't explain how she'd earned the call sign Ghost by appearing where enemies least expected and vanishing before they could react. "Fly what exactly?" Reaper's question hung in the air. Ghost stepped forward into the light, revealing the worn patches on her flight suit. The 104th Fighter Squadron insignia was faded but unmistakable. "Whatever you need me to fly, Captain." Her confidence wasn't arrogance. It was the quiet certainty of someone who had danced with death at 30,000 feet and lived to tell about it. The briefing officer, a nervous major, shuffled through his papers. "Ma'am, with respect, this mission requires—" "Precision," Ghost interrupted. "Low-level navigation through terrain that would make most pilots soil themselves. Close air support in conditions where GPS is unreliable and margin for error is measured in inches." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I'm guessing you need someone who can put ordnance on target without leveling the village next door." The silence that followed was different now. It carried weight, possibility, and perhaps the first stirring of respect. The mission clock on the wall read 3:47 hours. Dawn was coming, and with it, a chance to prove that sometimes the most unlikely warrior carries the sharpest sword. Captain Valdez studied the woman before him, seeing past her size to something harder to define, a stillness that spoke of battles fought and won in places where weakness meant death. "Tell me about the Ghost," he said finally. Zara's lips curved in the faintest smile. "The Ghost doesn't tell stories, Captain, she makes them." Outside, the pre-dawn darkness pressed against the windows like a living thing, but inside the briefing room, something had shifted. The impossible mission had just found its pilot, though none of them yet understood what that would mean. Ghost had learned to read rooms the way she read airspace, by watching for the subtle shifts that preceded turbulence. These operators were elite, accustomed to working with the best, but their skepticism was palpable. She'd encountered it countless times. The assumption that her gender somehow negated her training, her experience, her proven ability to deliver death from above with surgical precision. The briefing major cleared his throat. "Lieutenant Colonel, perhaps we should discuss the aircraft specifications first. This mission calls for close air support in extremely confined terrain. The mountains create wind shears that have downed." "How many aircraft?" Ghost asked, cutting through the technical preamble. Her dark eyes remained fixed on Captain Valdez, recognizing him as the decision-maker despite the major's apparent seniority. "One," Reaper replied. a single-engine aircraft capable of precision strikes and immediate extraction support. He paused, watching her reaction. The insertion team will be 12 operators. If you can't provide cover and extraction, they're dead. Ghost nodded slowly, processing the weight of responsibility. 12 lives depending on her ability to navigate mountain passes in darkness, deliver accurate fire support, and execute a flawless extraction under combat conditions. The kind of mission that separated legends from casualties. "What's the bird?" she asked. The briefing major consulted his tablet nervously. "We have access to an OV-10 Bronco, twin-engine turboprop, configured for forward air control and light attack. It's been modified with night vision-compatible glass cockpit, enhanced communications suite, and underwing hardpoints for precision ordnance," Ghost finished. "I know the aircraft." She'd flown Broncos in Iraq during the early days of the insurgency, when close air support meant the difference between coming home and coming home in a box. Captain Valdez leaned forward. "Know it how well?" "Well enough to put a Hellfire through a window at 300 feet while taking small arms fire," Ghost replied matter-of-factly. The room fell silent again, but this time the quiet carried a different quality, calculation rather than skepticism. One of the Delta operators, a massive sergeant with scarred hands, spoke for the first time. 300 feet, in mountains." Ghost turned to face him directly. "Sergeant, I've flown nap-of-the-earth missions where tree branches scrape my landing gear. 300 feet feels like cruising altitude." She wasn't boasting. Her voice carried the flat certainty of someone stating basic facts. The silence stretched until Captain Valdez stood. "Brief her on the mission profile," he told the major. "Full tactical overview, target assessment, and extraction protocols." His eyes never left Ghost's face. "Welcome to Operation Silent Thunder, Lieutenant Colonel." As the others began spreading maps and satellite imagery across the briefing table, Ghost felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling across her shoulders like an old, comfortable flight jacket. Somewhere in the Afghan mountains, 12 operators would soon depend on her ability to be their guardian angel. She'd earned her wings carrying that burden, and tonight she'd carry it again. The maps revealed a nightmare of terrain that would challenge even the most experienced pilots. The target compound sat in a valley so narrow that conventional aircraft couldn't maneuver effectively, surrounded by peaks that rose like granite teeth into the sky. Satellite imagery showed anti-aircraft positions and what appeared to be shoulder-fired missile emplacements. "The insertion will happen here." Captain Valdez indicated a ridge approximately 2 kilometers from the target. "Fast rope deployment from helicopters, but the birds can't loiter. They'll be gone 30 seconds after boots hit ground." Ghost studied the topographical lines, her trained eye automatically calculating approach angles, weapon envelopes, and escape routes. "What's my station?" "That's the problem," the briefing major interjected. "Traditional holding patterns are impossible due to the terrain. You'll need to maintain constant movement through these passes." His finger traced a serpentine route through the mountains, while remaining in communication with the ground team. "Flying a racetrack pattern through a maze," Ghost murmured, understanding the complexity immediately. It would require flying by instruments and instinct, navigating terrain that could kill her instantly if she deviated even slightly from the optimal flight path. "The target is time-sensitive," Valdez continued. "Intelligence indicates the HVT will only be at this location for a 6-hour window. Miss that window, and we're looking at months before another opportunity." Ghost traced her finger along the mountain ridges, calculating the challenges. Flying low enough to avoid radar detection while maintaining visual contact with the ground team. Managing fuel consumption during constant maneuvering. Delivering precision strikes without collateral damage in a valley where the margin of error was measured in meters rather than kilometers. "Opposition forces?" she asked. 2 platoons of Taliban fighters, possibly more, the intelligence officer replied. Confirmed RPGs, heavy machine guns, and at least 3 man-portable air defense systems. They've been preparing this position for weeks. Ghost nodded, absorbing the threat assessment. MANPADs were every close air support pilot's nightmare, heat-seeking missiles that could track aircraft even at low altitude. Success would depend on speed, unpredictability, and the element of surprise. Ammunition loadout. 4 Hellfires, 2 rocket pods with high-explosive rounds, and 800 rounds of 20 for the cannon, Valdez replied. Enough to level the compound, but precision is critical. Intelligence indicates possible civilian hostages in the adjacent buildings. The weight of responsibility pressed heavier, not just keeping 12 operators alive, but ensuring innocent lives weren't lost in the crossfire. This was why Ghost had spent years perfecting her craft, why she'd pushed herself beyond the limits that satisfied other pilots. Moments like these separated true warriors from those who simply wore the uniform. Captain Valdez closed the tactical folders. Questions, Lieutenant Colonel. Ghost met his gaze steadily. Just one, Captain. When do we launch? Dawn was breaking over the mountains as Ghost performed her pre-flight inspection of the OV-10 Bronco. The aircraft sat on the tarmac like a predator waiting to hunt, its twin turboprops gleaming in the early morning light. She ran her hands along the control surfaces, checking for damage or irregularities that could prove fatal at low altitude. The crew chief, a grizzled technical sergeant named Rodriguez, watched her work with professional interest. She's been modified with the latest avionics suite, he said. Night vision goggle-compatible displays, enhanced GPS, and a heads-up display that'll paint targets for you in real time. Ghost nodded, continuing her inspection. The external fuel tanks were full, extending her loiter time. The Hellfire missiles hung beneath the wings like sleeping vipers, their guidance systems already programmed with preliminary target coordinates. Everything looked perfect, but perfection on the ground meant nothing if the aircraft couldn't perform when lives hung in the balance. Engines. Overhauled last month, Rodriguez replied. Clean compression, no oil leaks, and the props are balanced to factory specifications. She'll purr like a kitten or roar like a tiger, depending on what you ask of her. Ghost completed her walk around and climbed into the cockpit. The familiar embrace of pilot and aircraft settled around her like coming home. Her hands moved automatically across switches and controls, muscle memory guiding her through the pre-flight checklist with practiced efficiency. Tower Ghost 1 requesting clearance for tactical departure, she radioed. Ghost 1 cleared for departure. Winds 270 at 15 knots, visibility unlimited. Godspeed. The Bronco's engine spooled up with a rising whine that Ghost felt in her bones. This was the moment when earthbound concerns fell away, when she became something more than human, a fusion of pilot, aircraft, and deadly purpose. The aircraft rolled forward, gathering speed until the moment of transformation when wheels left tarmac and she was airborne, climbing into the crystalline morning sky. Below, the forward operating base dwindled to miniature proportions. Ahead lay the mountains of Afghanistan, their peaks catching the early sunlight like ancient guardians protecting secrets older than civilization. Ghost banked the Bronco toward her assigned heading, settling into the rhythm that would define the next 6 hours. Ghost 1, this is Reaper Actual, Captain Valdez's voice crackled through her headset. Ground team is airborne, ETA to insertion 37 minutes. Copy, Reaper Actual. Ghost 1 proceeding to holding area. She checked her navigation display, confirming her route through the mountain passes. The GPS showed waypoints that would keep her hidden from enemy radar while maintaining communication with the insertion team. The landscape below began to change as she flew deeper into Taliban territory. Peaceful valleys gave way to scarred mountainsides where years of conflict had left their mark. She could see the burned hulks of vehicles along mountain roads, evidence of IED attacks and ambushes that had claimed countless lives. Ghost's radio crackled again. "All stations, this is Overwatch. Be advised, enemy radio chatter has increased significantly in the target area. They know something's coming." The mission had just become more dangerous. Alerted enemies meant prepared defenses, hidden positions, and the likelihood of a hot extraction. Ghost adjusted her flight path slightly, using terrain features to mask her approach while remaining within communication range of the ground team. Flying through the mountain passes required constant attention and split-second decision-making. Wind currents bounced off the rocky walls unpredictably, creating turbulence that could slam an aircraft into the mountainside without warning. Ghost rode the Bronco through the chaos with steady hands, her training and instincts merging into something approaching artistry. 30 minutes to insertion, came the update from Reaper Actual. "Ground team is locked and loaded." Ghost keyed her microphone. "Copy. Ghost 1 is in position and ready to provide close air support." She was exactly where she needed to be, when she needed to be there, with the tools necessary to keep 12 operators alive in hostile territory. The mountains stretched endlessly in all directions, hiding valleys where men would soon fight and die. Ghost had become their guardian angel, invisible but omnipresent, ready to rain death on anyone who threatened her charges. This was why she flew, why she dedicated her life to mastering the deadly art of close air support. In minutes, everything would change. The insertion helicopters appeared as tiny specks against the mountainous backdrop, flying low and fast through the valleys to avoid detection. Ghost watched them through her binoculars, counting the aircraft and calculating their approach timing. 2 Black Hawks carrying the assault team, with a pair of Apache gunships providing escort until they reached the drop zone. Ghost 1 Reaper Actual, we're 2 minutes from insertion. Confirm your position. Ghost checked her instruments and GPS display. Ghost 1 is positioned at Waypoint Alpha, altitude Angels 15, ready to provide immediate fire support. She was flying a racetrack pattern between the mountain peaks, maintaining altitude that kept her above small arms range while allowing rapid response to ground team requests. The lead helicopter pilot's voice came through the radio. "Insertion birds are taking light ground fire from the eastern ridge. Request immediate suppression." Ghost rolled the Bronco into a steep dive, her eyes scanning the terrain for muzzle flashes that would reveal enemy positions. There, a series of bright flickers among the rocks where Taliban fighters had positioned themselves to ambush the landing zone. She lined up her first attack run, the aircraft's targeting system painting the hostile positions on her heads-up display. "Ghost 1 engaging Eastern Ridge. Danger close to friendly forces," she radioed, her voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. The Bronco's 20 cannon spooled up with a distinctive whine, ready to deliver precisely aimed death. She pulled the trigger, and the aircraft shuddered as high-explosive rounds tore into the rocky outcropping. The enemy fire ceased immediately, muzzle flashes extinguished by devastating accurate fire from above. Ghost pulled up sharply, climbing back to altitude while scanning for additional threats. "Good effect on target, Ghost 1, reported the helicopter pilot. "Insertion proceeding as planned." Below, the Black Hawks had settled into the landing zone, their rotors whipping dust into choking clouds as operators fast-roped to the ground with practiced efficiency. Within 30 seconds, both helicopters were climbing back to safe altitude, leaving 12 men alone in hostile territory with only Ghost providing overwatch. "Reaper Actual, all boots are on ground," came Captain Valdez's voice. "Beginning approach to target compound. Request continuous air support." "Copy, Reaper Actual. Ghost 1 has eyes on your position and is ready to engage targets of opportunity." Ghost adjusted her flight pattern to maintain visual contact with the ground team while staying within immediate response range. The operators moved through the terrain with deadly efficiency, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Ghost watched through her targeting pod as they approached the compound, noting the defensive positions and calculating the best angles of attack if fire support became necessary. Ghost 1, Reaper Actual. We have visual on the target building. Confirm your ordnance and readiness status. Ghost performed a quick systems check. Ghost 1 is armed with 4 Hellfire missiles, 76 rockets, and 650 rounds of 20. All systems are green and ready for immediate employment. The ground team had reached the perimeter of the compound. Through her optics, Ghost could see Taliban fighters moving between buildings, apparently unaware that death circled overhead like a mechanical hawk. The radio crackled with tension as the mission entered its most dangerous phase. All stations, this is Reaper Actual. We are beginning final approach to the target. Stand by for immediate action. Ghost tightened her grip on the flight controls, every sense focused on the drama unfolding below. The next few minutes would determine whether 12 operators went home to their families or joined the countless others who had died in these unforgiving mountains. She was their lifeline, their guardian angel, and she would not fail them. The compound erupted in gunfire as the assault team breached the outer perimeter. Muzzle flashes sparkled like deadly fireflies in Ghost's night vision display, showing her exactly where Taliban defenders had positioned themselves. The tactical radio frequency exploded with controlled chaos as operators called out targets, movements, and tactical updates. Contact left, 2 fighters in the southeast building. RPG team on the north wall. Ghost 1, Reaper Actual. We need immediate fire support on the north wall. Danger close, friendlies within 50 meters. Ghost rolled into an attack dive, her targeting system automatically calculating the precise angle needed to eliminate the RPG team without endangering the assault force. The mathematics of death played out in milliseconds. Projectile trajectory, blast radius, friendly positions, and acceptable margins of error. Ghost 1 engaging north wall with 20. Friendlies, get your heads down. The cannon roared, sending a stream of high-explosive rounds into the Taliban position. The RPG team disappeared in a shower of stone and debris, their weapons silenced permanently. Ghost pulled up sharply, already scanning for the next threat as her aircraft climbed back to safe altitude. Excellent shooting, Ghost 1. North wall is clear. But the Taliban weren't finished. Ghost's threat warning system suddenly screamed as a heat-seeking missile launched from a concealed position, its infrared signature tracking directly toward her aircraft. She threw the Bronco into a violent evasive maneuver, dispensing chaff and flares while diving toward the mountainous terrain that could break the missile's lock. Missile in flight, Ghost 1 is evading. The SAM streaked past her wingtip, close enough that she could see its fins stabilizing in flight. Ghost had seconds to identify the launch position and eliminate it before the Taliban could reload and fire again. Her eyes swept the compound until she spotted the telltale smoke signature of the missile launch. Reaper Actual, MA and PAD position identified in the northwest corner, requesting clearance to engage with Hellfire. Cleared hot, Ghost 1, take them out. Ghost lined up the shot with mechanical precision, her targeting system painting the laser guidance spot exactly where it needed to be. The Hellfire missile dropped from her wing, its motor igniting as it streaked toward the target with deadly accuracy. The explosion lit up the compound like daylight, eliminating the anti-aircraft threat permanently. Direct hit on the northwest corner. SAM's sight is destroyed. The assault team pressed their attack, moving through the compound with coordinated precision while Ghost maintained overwatch from above. Her role had evolved from fire support to guardian angel, watching every corner and shadow for threats that could endanger the operators below. Ghost 1, Reaper Actual. We have secured the primary target building, beginning extraction of the HVT. Ghost felt a surge of relief mixed with continued vigilance. The mission's primary objective was accomplished, but extraction through hostile territory remained the most dangerous phase. Taliban reinforcements would be converging on the compound, and the ground team would be vulnerable during their movement to the extraction point. Copy, Reaper Actual. Ghost One will provide cover during movement to extraction. She adjusted her flight pattern to cover the route the operators would take, already identifying potential ambush sites and calculating response times for effective fire support. The mission clock showed they'd been on target for 23 minutes. Every second increased the likelihood of enemy reinforcements arriving in overwhelming numbers. The extraction began with clockwork precision, but the Taliban had finally organized their response. Ghost watched through her targeting system as enemy fighters moved through the surrounding terrain, attempting to establish ambush positions along the planned extraction route. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Reaper Actual. Ghost One has multiple enemy movements converging on your extraction route. I count at least 30 fighters in 3 separate groups. Captain Valdez's response was immediate and calm despite the circumstances. Copy, Ghost One. We need a clear path to extraction point Bravo, whatever it takes. Ghost understood the implication. The ground team was carrying a high-value prisoner through terrain where Taliban fighters held every advantage except one. She was above them, armed, and utterly committed to keeping her charges alive. Reaper Actual, I'm going to clear your route with rockets and cannon fire. Keep the team moving and mark your position with infrared strobes. The Bronco screamed down from altitude as Ghost began her attack run against the largest group of Taliban fighters. They had positioned themselves in a rocky outcropping that provided excellent cover from ground fire, but left them exposed to air attack. Her rocket pods erupted in sequence, sending high-explosive warheads into the enemy position with devastating effect. First group neutralized, continue movement. But the other Taliban fighters had learned from watching their comrades die. They spread out, using individual cover and making themselves harder targets while maintaining their ability to ambush the extraction team. Ghost would have to engage them individually, a time-consuming process that burned precious fuel and ammunition. Ghost One, be advised, we have multiple technical vehicles approaching from the east, heavy machine guns mounted. Ghost spotted the approaching trucks, Toyota pickups with heavy weapons mounted in their beds, racing along the mountain roads to intercept the extraction team. These were mobile threats that could reposition quickly and deliver overwhelming firepower against operators on foot. I see the technicals, engaging with Hellfire missiles. The first Hellfire streaked down like a falling star, its warhead turning the lead technical into twisted metal and flames. The second missile eliminated another vehicle, but the remaining trucks had dispersed and taken cover behind rocky outcroppings. 2 technicals destroyed, but we still have mobile threats in the area, Ghost reported. Her ammunition was running low, and the extraction team still had half a kilometer of hostile terrain to navigate. Captain Valdez's voice remained steady despite the deteriorating situation. Ghost One, we're taking fire from the ridgeline to our north, multiple positions with heavy weapons. Ghost spotted the Taliban fighters positioned along the ridge, their muzzle flashes clearly visible in her night vision system. They had excellent fields of fire covering the extraction route, and the ground team would have to expose themselves to reach the landing zone. Reaper Actual, I need you to mark the ridgeline targets with laser designators. I'm going in with cannon and remaining rockets. The assault was unlike anything Ghost had flown before, a sustained attack through a gauntlet of enemy fire that required split-second timing and absolute precision. She dove the Bronco through the mountain passes, using terrain features to mask her approach while lining up targets that threatened the extraction team. Her cannon hammered enemy positions with surgical strikes, each burst carefully calculated to eliminate threats without endangering the operators below. The battlefield had become a three-dimensional chess game where Ghost moved her pieces, rockets, missiles, and cannon rounds, across a board defined by mountain peaks and valley floors. Every shot had to count. Ammunition was running dangerously low, and the extraction helicopters were still 15 minutes away. Ghost 1, Reaper Actual. We're 200 meters from the landing zone but taking concentrated fire from the western slope. Multiple heavy machine guns. Ghost checked her remaining ordnance. 1 Hellfire missile, 12 rockets, and less than 200 rounds of cannon ammunition. Enough to clear the landing zone, but not enough for mistakes. She rolled into her final attack run, knowing this would determine whether 12 operators lived or died. The western slope erupted under her guns as she walked cannon fire across Taliban positions with methodical precision. Each burst found its mark, silencing heavy weapons that had pinned down the extraction team. The last Hellfire missile eliminated a mortar position that had been ranging in on the landing zone. Western slope is clear, all positions neutralized. But Ghost's threat warning system was screaming again. Another missile launch, this one from a position she hadn't detected. The SAM was tracking directly toward her aircraft, and she was too low and too slow to outrun it through evasive maneuvers. Time seemed to slow as Ghost threw the Bronco into a diving turn toward the mountainside, hopping to break the missile's lock with terrain masking. The weapon streaked past her canopy so close that she could feel its heat through the cockpit glass. Ghost 1 is under fire, taking evasive action. She climbed rapidly, gaining altitude for another attack run, but her fuel gauges showed critical levels. The constant maneuvering and high-power settings had burned through her reserves faster than planned. She had perhaps 10 minutes of flight time remaining before forced to return to base. Reaper Actual, Ghost 1 is bingo fuel. I can provide one more attack run before I have to depart station. Captain Valdez understood the implications immediately. Copy, Ghost 1. Extraction birds are 5 minutes out. We'll hold position until you clear the landing zone. Ghost surveyed the battlefield one final time, identifying the remaining threats that could endanger the helicopters during landing. 3 Taliban positions remained active, positioned to engage aircraft during the vulnerable approach phase. She would have to eliminate all 3 with her remaining ammunition. The final attack run was a masterpiece of aerial gunnery. Ghost dove the Bronco through concentrated ground fire, her remaining cannon rounds finding each target with devastating accuracy. The landing zone fell silent as the last Taliban defenders were eliminated. Landing zone is clear, all threats neutralized. The extraction helicopters appeared through the mountain passes, their rotors churning the thin air as they descended toward the landing zone. Ghost maintained overwatch until she saw the ground team safely aboard, then turned the Bronco toward home as her fuel gauges approached emergency levels. Ghost 1 Reaper Actual, mission successful. All personnel extracted safely with HVT secured. Outstanding job. Ghost's hands trembled slightly as adrenaline began to fade, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of a mission accomplished. She had kept her promise. 12 operators were going home to their families, and a dangerous terrorist leader was in custody. The flight back to base gave Ghost time to process what had happened over the target. She had flown one of the most challenging close air support missions of her career, threading the needle between success and catastrophe with precision that few pilots could have matched. The skeptical looks from the briefing room seemed like ancient history now. As the forward operating base appeared on the horizon, Ghost reflected on the radio chatter she'd monitored during extraction. The ground team's communications had shifted subtly throughout the mission, from professional courtesy at the beginning to genuine respect by the end. Call signs like "ma'am" had given way to Ghost 1 spoken, with the kind of reverence reserved for warriors who had proven themselves under fire. Captain Valdez's voice crackled through her headset one final time. "Ghost One, Reaper Actual. I don't know how you threaded that needle, but you saved our lives tonight. That was some of the finest flying I've ever witnessed." Ghost keyed her microphone, keeping her response characteristically understated. "Just doing my job, Reaper Actual. Glad everybody made it home." But she knew it had been more than just doing her job. She had demonstrated something that couldn't be taught in flight school or measured in standardized tests, the warrior spirit that transformed technical skills into life-saving artistry. Tonight, she hadn't just been a pilot. She had been the angel of death for America's enemies and the guardian angel for America's warriors. The Bronco touched down on the runway with barely enough fuel to taxi to the flight line. Ground crews rushed to secure the aircraft while Ghost completed her post-flight checklist with the same methodical precision she'd maintained throughout the mission. Rodriguez, the crew chief, was waiting when she climbed out of the cockpit. "How'd she fly, ma'am?" he asked, running his hands over the aircraft's control surfaces. "Like a dream," Ghost replied, pulling off her flight helmet and letting her long black hair fall loose around her shoulders. "She brought everybody home tonight." As word of the mission's success spread through the base, Ghost found herself surrounded by operators, aircrew, and support personnel who had heard fragments of the radio chatter. The woman who had risen from the shadows in the briefing room had become a legend in the space of 6 hours. But Ghost deflected the attention with characteristic modesty, crediting her aircraft, the ground crew, and the brave operators who had executed the mission under fire. She understood that true warriors didn't seek glory. They sought only the quiet satisfaction of missions accomplished and comrades brought home safely. Captain Valdez found her in the debriefing room, where she was completing the paperwork that documented every aspect of the mission for future analysis. He sat across from her, his expression serious but respectful. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. Ghost looked up from her reports, raising an eyebrow in question. "When you stood up in that briefing room, I had my doubts," Valdez continued. "I've worked with a lot of pilots, and I've never seen flying like what you did tonight. You didn't just provide close air support. You conducted a symphony of destruction that kept my people alive in an impossible situation." Ghost set down her pen and met his gaze directly. "Captain, every pilot in this theater would have done the same thing. We don't leave people behind, and we don't let the enemy win. That's not about gender or politics or proving points. That's about being an American warrior." Valdez nodded slowly, understanding that he was looking at something rare and precious, a pilot who had transcended mere technical competence to achieve something approaching artistry. The after-action report is going to make interesting reading at the Pentagon. They're going to want to know how one pilot eliminated 37 enemy fighters and multiple vehicle targets while protecting a ground team during extraction. "Numbers don't tell the story," Ghost replied, returning to her paperwork. "The story is that 12 operators went home to their families tonight, and a terrorist leader is going to face justice. Everything else is just details." As dawn broke over the Afghan mountains, Ghost completed her reports and secured her gear for some well-deserved rest. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that warriors come in all shapes and sizes. But tonight had been special, the night when Ghost stepped out of the shadows and into legend. The debriefing sessions that followed Operation Silent Thunder became the stuff of military folklore. Intelligence analysts studied Ghost's tactics, flight instructors incorporated her techniques into training curricula, and combat leaders requested her for their most challenging missions. The pilot who had been an afterthought in the briefing room had become the most sought-after close air support asset in theater. But with recognition came scrutiny. Ghost found herself subjected to interviews with military journalists, requests for speaking engagements, and pressure to become a poster child for women in combat roles. She declined most requests, preferring to let her flying speak for itself while focusing on the mission at hand. "You could write your own ticket," Colonel Harrison, her squadron commander, told her during a private meeting. "Pentagon wants to fast-track your promotion, Air University wants you as an instructor, and every major defense contractor is looking for a spokesperson with your credentials." Ghost listened politely, then shook her head. "With respect, sir, my place is in the cockpit. There are operators downrange who need air support, and I didn't spend 15 years perfecting my craft to become a desk pilot." Harrison wasn't surprised by her response. He'd worked with Ghost long enough to know that she was driven by something deeper than career advancement or recognition. She flew because she was called to fly, because the mission demanded her unique combination of skills and dedication. "Fair enough," he replied, "but understand that your actions out there have consequences beyond just this deployment. You've proven something that a lot of people said couldn't be proven. That matters." Ghost understood what he meant, but she also understood that her actions spoke louder than any words could. Every successful mission, every life saved, every target eliminated added another line to a story being written in the skies above Afghanistan. She wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. She was simply being herself, and herself happened to be one of the finest combat pilots in the United States Air Force. The weeks following Operation Silent Thunder brought a steady stream of challenging missions that seemed designed to test Ghost's capabilities. Night interdiction flights against Taliban supply convoys, close air support for special operations teams conducting high-risk raids, combat search and rescue missions in contested airspace. Each mission added to her growing reputation while honing skills that were already razor-sharp. "They're giving you all the hard ones," Captain Martinez, another A-10 pilot, observed during a mission briefing. "Word is that operations planners specifically request you for anything involving tight quarters or danger-close situations." Ghost shrugged, checking her flight plan against the target materials. "Fine by me. Those are the missions that matter most." She'd rather fly the difficult missions herself than risk having less experienced pilots struggle with situations that could cost lives on the ground. The mission briefing covered a Taliban compound in the Paktika province, where intelligence indicated a bomb-making facility was producing improvised explosive devices for attacks against coalition forces. The compound was located in a densely populated area where precision was absolutely critical to avoid civilian casualties. Collateral damage assessment shows at least 40 civilians in adjacent buildings, the intelligence officer explained. Any missed shots or overpenetration could result in significant civilian casualties. Ghost studied the satellite imagery, calculating angles of attack that would eliminate the target while minimizing risk to innocent people. This was the kind of mission that separated true professionals from merely competent pilots, situations where technical skill merged with moral responsibility to create something approaching art. As she prepared for another night mission over the Afghan mountains, Ghost reflected on how far she had come since that first briefing where Captain Valdez had asked for pilots. The skeptical looks and dismissive attitudes had given way to professional respect and genuine admiration. She had proven herself not through words or politics, but through the simple act of doing her job better than anyone else could. Her call sign had evolved from